I'm trying to do is connect purposeful engagement, flow states, adaptations in the special needs world, and how we could avoid problems where we are thinking something is going to happen and not really being able to progress check things and make sure that things are happening the way that you are expecting them to, or at least they're in line with your goals. So what I'm going to do is spend just a minute or two going through the flow state in terms of what I have to do as a special needs music educator and the kids that I work with. And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because you saw the video already, but I have a couple of very specific points that need to be made. A flow state is a highly rewarding, altered state of mind, which, as we saw in the video, may be referred to as Zen state, in the zone, like I call it, a transcendent experience, and being completely engrossed in a moment and taking on challenges for the sake of taking on the challenges and accomplishing them. But now we have to get a little bit more specific as to how this actually happens. It's not just somebody's trying something that they like and now we're in a state of flow. The bedrock of every state of flow is something called transient hypofrontality. Anybody want to take a stab at what that means? Well, lucky for you, I'll tell you. Transient is temporary, hypo is reduction, frontality is your prefrontal cortex. A temporary reduction in the activity of your prefrontal cortex. Raise your hand if you've had anxiety. What you're looking for is a temporary reduction in the activity of your prefrontal cortex because your brain is just shooting off like mad. You're thinking too many things and you just need to figure out how to take it all down a notch. What you're trying to experience is transient hypofrontality. And to get there, you need to form what we call a closed mental loop. We were talking about loops before. Scott will be talking about them even more. But we need to get a closed mental loop going in order to experience transient hypofrontality. Because if you are overwhelmed with everything you're thinking about, you need to be able to put it all aside and do another thing that we call creating a protective shield around your concentration by forming these loops of engagement. Transient hypofrontality is the unifying feature of all altered states of mind. So what we're talking about here is if somebody's having a stressful day and goes and grabs a drink and calms things down, all the anxiety starts to take it down a notch. It's because that drink is leading to a state of transient hypofrontality, which allows you to change your state of mind. I like to bring people there through the piano. Now, I know from personal experience what it's like to get into a flow state when you're at the piano, and I have completely dove into my own work here using occupational octaves because the idea that this benefit could be brought to the special needs community to me was something worth going for with everything I had. Lucky for me, in 2010, in the American Psychological Association, the psychophysiology of flow during piano playing was published, which actually tells exactly what's going on with somebody when they are in a flow state at the piano. So to go through this rather quickly, 5 trials of bringing in high-level musicians to play things that are within their own challenge skill balance, meaning it's not so difficult that it creates anxiety, nor so easy that it creates boredom. If we have any education people here, we're talking about the zone of proximal development. So over the course of 5 tries, the performers had an increased state of flow, especially when going from the first trial to the second trial. What does that actually mean for us? Well, the first graph on your top left is showing an increase in your zygomaticus major muscle. Those are your smiling muscles. Your smiling muscles are actually activated, and this is not viewed by looking at somebody smiling. There's equipment hooked up to the cheeks, and you're not talking about watching a smile. You're talking about the nerves starting to come alive. The graph on C is your variation in your heart rate. And what's going on is your variation of your heart rate is coming down, as you can see with this graph over here. The reason it's coming down is because when you're in a flow state, your maximum pulse pressure comes down, and your minimum pulse pressure comes up. And what that means is that if your blood is moving through your system with a very large range, there's a lot of room for variability, which you don't want. This seems to shrink the opportunity for the variability by, again, lowering the ceiling of your heart rate and raising the floor of your heart rate. The graphs are B and F. I do not feel qualified enough to actually explain them to you. However, these are both akin to reductions in blood pressure. This is your heart power and your pulse power. I just don't want to say anything the wrong way, so we're just going to go with a relatively generic statement on that one. These are actual benefits that you might go to a doctor for if you're having a stressful time. You might be prescribed some kind of medicine, you might be prescribed some kind of pill, but these results are coming from playing the piano. And this is something that if we could bring into the special needs world, for me personally, I find it to be a responsibility. So, Dr. Shinsek Mihai, while they talked about 5 divisions of flow, there's actually 9 that he publishes in most of his books, and we're going to go through those relatively quickly. The first is a proper challenge skill balance. Can't be so hard that it creates anxiety, nor so easy that it creates boredom. The second is action awareness merging. Action awareness merging is the moment that you're driving, the light turns green, and your foot just moves over to that gas pedal on its own. It happens autonomously. It's in you already, and you know what to do without having to think about it whatsoever. You need to have clear goals, unambiguous feedback, which with music is very easy. If you hear a wrong note, then you know you've gotten improper feedback, a sense of concentration, and a sense of control. Then, when we have those going, somebody may experience a loss of self-consciousness, a loss of sense of time, and an autotelic experience. And an autotelic experience is basically when you have euphoria in your own mind and your own body. There are increases of serotonin and dopamine when one is experiencing something autotelic. Now, this is all great here, but the research that was done with people that are very, very high functioning. They're high-level classical piano players. And that creates a problem for me because I believe my students are experiencing this flow state, but numbers 7, 8, and 9 are testimonial based. I'm telling you that I had a loss of self-consciousness while I was playing. I'm telling you that I couldn't tell if it was 10 minutes or 10 hours. And I'm telling you that I had euphoria and that I had serotonin and dopamine running through my veins because of the experience. But the students that I work with, the students that many of us interact with, cannot give us a reliable testimonial. You need to have somebody that could tell exactly what's going on in order to have that testimonial. So I have this rough time because I can't just say my students are experiencing a flow state because these 3 items are necessary in order to really, really prove it. So what I've done is I've divided everything into 2 different sections, the technical experience dimensions and the transcendent experience dimensions. And that's why I split this exactly as I split it. Okay, so that's my little background on flow, background on the loops, and I'm gonna have Scott take over from this point to talk about some really incredible work that he does with a handful of his clients.
So when I was talking to Lee about this and learning about